So glad you guys are here. My name is Chris Pleckenpole, and I'm one of the pastors here. And we're coming towards the end of May. For some of you, you've just graduated. For others, you're finishing up school. Where are my teachers at? Where are my teachers? Man, thank God for our teachers. Everyone give up for our teachers. You can probably read this today because of your teachers. It might be cliche, but man, it's true, isn't it? What would you do without them? So I'm just grateful for all the people here that we have serving in schools, and that's a real ministry to reach kids with education, but more importantly, be an example of what the life-changing reality of Jesus Christ can do. So here we are. We are in the kind of wrapping up. We're about to land the plane on this series, Making Sense of the Nonsense. And for some of you who maybe you're just coming in, you're kind of like getting the tail end of this, and I'm going to try and make it make sense for you with a big review. But if you go to wellsbranchchurch.com, and then you'll check out our sermon audio page, you can watch or listen to all of these sermons there, or just download our podcast. And so here it is. Here's basically the recap and review. We've been talking about this thing of like when things don't make sense, and we've been following a story of a guy from the Bible. It's been kind of like, this is my... If you want to talk about your favorite Bible story, if you're allowed to have a favorite Bible story, this is mine. And it's the story of Joseph. And Joseph was the son of the favorite son of a dysfunctional family. He had a father who, he was like the favorite kid of the favorite wife. And that was always awkward for him. And he turned 17, and the brothers are not exactly too thrilled with the fact he's the favorite kid with a favorite wife and has all these dreams about how much everyone else is going to bow down to him. And so these brothers, they take him and they sell him into slavery. He ends up going to Egypt as a slave. He gets accused of a crime he doesn't commit, and then he's put in prison and in a dungeon. And his life is going to be miserable for forever. And 4 times in Genesis 39 is this like, man, it's like a chapter of the Bible that you need to just kind of like make your own. 4 times in Genesis 39 it says this: the Lord was with Joseph. And you're like, man, I don't know if I want the Lord with me, right? You get rejected by your family, sold into slavery, accused of crime, you have the courage not to commit, and then you're put into a dungeon for the rest of your life. I don't know if I want that God to be with me. Just throwing that out there. But it says even in the midst of the worst of these circumstances that God was kind of orchestrating a plan that nobody else could see. And Joseph's strategy during that time was simply to do what anybody would do that was confident that God was with him. Now think about that. In the worst of times, Joseph simply did what anybody would do who was confident that God was with him. And then here's what happens. Things turn on the upswing for him. He goes from being prison lackey to being ruler of all Egypt. I mean, in a day. It took like a 30-minute conversation with Pharaoh to make that happen. Next thing you know, he's rolling around in a chariot with the tunes turned up. I mean, things are going pretty well. And in fact, he has opportunity after opportunity, and he simply does what anybody would do in face of ultimate opportunity and prosperity of anybody that was confident that God was with him. And then last week, we watched Joseph go through the worst of times, went through the best of times, and then he had an opportunity for revenge. And this is where we got a little personal, right? We talked about forgiveness last week, and that always makes people a little antsy, and so we're going to touch on it again. He went and he forgave the people who hurt him the most, the people that, when you think about having ultimate power and you have a chance to get back at somebody and make them pay. I mean, think about that. What would you do to that person? You'd be like, I put it on TV. It'd be like Jerry Springer show. It would be kind of great, and then they would pay, right? I mean, he had that opportunity, but he simply did what anybody would do when faced with the ultimate opportunity to pay somebody back who was confident that God was with him, and he forgave his brothers. Oh, man. And as I kind of been just embracing the story and just kind of making it, more of my own, I feel like this story seems to pop up everywhere. In fact, I was reading just this past week. I was reading the Bible like I do any day. If you guys ever read the Bible and all of a sudden like something applies directly to you, like, oh my God, look at this. And so I opened the Bible up, and here it was. It was Psalm 105. It's like, again, not everyone like just rolls through the Psalms, but I'm doing the Bible in a year, and I'm at Psalm 105 at this particular week. It was kind of cool. And this is talking about how the nation of Israel is formed, again, kind of give a backdrop and a history of it all. And when he summoned a famine, God caused a famine to fall on the land and broke all supply of bread. He had sent a man ahead of them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. And we find out a little bit about the prison conditions here. His feet were hurt with fetters. All right, what's a fetter? Anyone know what a fetter is? Shackle, all right? So think shackle. The vocabulary 101. Thank you, teacher. All right. His feet were hurt with fetters. His neck was put in a collar of iron until what he had said came to pass. The word of the Lord tested him. Because the only word of the Lord he's getting, he's like, I remember that one day I would kind of be ruler of Egypt and it would happen. I don't know how it was going to happen, but that's the word of the Lord. I had to trust in that, and it tested him. And the king sent and released him. The ruler of the people set him free. He made him lord of his house and ruler of all his possessions, to bind his princes at his pleasure and to teach his elders wisdom. Now, I wanted to focus on this. The word of the Lord tested him. I want you to think about that. I mean, of all the stories, whenever you have a hero story, I mean, like, think of any like superhero, from Thor, Superman, any of the Avengers, Captain America. There's always a part of which, I mean, Jesus, right? I mean, they're all in the same vein, right? There's always a part at which there's the hero goes through the crucible of testing, right? Like if you're Superman, like all of a sudden kryptonite comes out. Oh no, what am I gonna do? And like he has to kind of rely on something beyond the strength that he has, right? And that's what we see in Joseph's life. Like the kid's 17-year-old kid, he's in a well-to-do family, and all of a sudden everything is taken away from him. And he's going to be tested. And that's why we love the story. The problem is we just don't love the story when we're the story. Like, I don't want to be a star of that story. I don't like being the star of the story where, like, my life is miserable. I have that crazy breakup. You guys know what I'm talking about. And you're in the fetal position crying, right? We've all had that moment. Like, that, we don't want to be in the middle of that story. Like, oh, it's all going to end well. But, yeah, it's not ending well right now. And there's a tendency in us, isn't there, isn't this true, that we take just the mess that we find ourselves in, and we start asking God why, and we kind of forget about, like, every other hero story there was, that there was a crucible, and there was a painful moment, and there was, like, a moment of testing, and that's why we love the story, because we're cheering for the hero, and we kind of forget that anyone cares about us. And we go into this world of isolation, right? We're just like, nobody cares, screw you guys, I'm going home, taking my balls with me. And that's when we quit. We all know the story is awesome when the hero doesn't quit, that in the midst of the circumstances kind of pushes through with a determination or says, I'm going to trust in something greater than myself. We all love that story. But when it's us, we don't love that story. And what I want, here's my goal for this morning, is that you, in whatever mess that you're in right now, whatever mess it is, or whatever mess you're about to be in, let's just be real, right? Maybe you're not in a mess now, but you soon will be. Whatever mess that is, that you will be able to look through the mess to the ultimate message behind it, that God is in complete control. That's like you're walking out of here this morning, you're like, God can send me any mess. I'm going to turn it into a message. I don't want to be cliche, but, we're throwing cliches out left and right this morning, so we might as well just own one, right? I want whatever mess that you're going through right now, whatever relationship struggle, whatever job issue, whatever boss that's a jerk for the billionth time, whatever crazy issue you have with your family, like it's just weird, I know. I want you to turn that mess into a message. And I want you to walk through the story with Joseph, and we're going to land the plane on his life. And I want us to open up our Bibles. And so if you don't have a Bible, I love Bibles. Like, we love the Word of God around here. And so if you don't have a Bible at all, this is our gift to you. Like, we want you to have a Bible. If you don't have a Bible today, borrow ours and just leave it on the chair, and then we'll pick it up afterwards. Or you can help us whenever you're stacking up chairs after the second service. Anyway. All right, so mild pitch for the setup and tear down team. Help us out. So we're here in Genesis chapter 46. That's going to be on page 39 of the Bibles we're passing out. And in this story, it's Joseph is sending for his dad. So he's forgiven his brothers. He sends his brothers back to where Jacob lives. He's like, you're not going to believe this. All your son Joseph is alive. He's like, I don't believe you. But then there's like a whole caravan of Egyptian like chariots and buckets of gold and leprechauns. I mean, it's just there's a whole bunch of stuff there that everyone's kind of excited about. Like, wow. Jacob's like, all right, I guess I kind of have to believe you. Like, where'd all this money come from? Where'd all these chariots come from? It's kind of hard to believe that my son, who I thought was eaten by a wild animal at 17, is now like the ruler of all Egypt. But he saw a lot of movies, and so he was okay with it. So he's like, all right, I'm going to go. And in fact, this is what he said, Genesis 46. He says, so Israel, he's like, fine, I'm going. He took his journey with all that he had. So he packs up all his belongings, and there's like 70 people in the family, and they all make their way down. And on the way, they make a pit stop in Beersheba. All right, I don't know if they were filling up gas, getting water, or whatever, but it just so happened to be this is the place where Isaac, his father, had sacrificed. They had journeyed a long way, and Abraham, his grandfather, had also sacrificed here. And so Jacob sacrifices to God, and he has a worship moment. And that night, something happens. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. And Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. Which is, this is such comforting news. This is a dad who, favorite kid, right? I know we shouldn't have favorites, but he did, and that was his favorite son. There's one thing he wanted to see was his boy alive again, and so God promises to him in a vision of the night that your son, Joseph, who you love, is going to close your eyes before you die. And then they start making their way, and they're about there. And Judah was sent ahead, so Jacob sends Judah ahead. He's going to go meet up with Joseph to kind of, where do we make the left turn at, and make sure GPS is coordinated. And so they get there, and he sent Judah ahead of him to show Joseph the way before him in Goshen. And Goshen was the land that they were given. They would be able to shepherd sheep. Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. Now, I'm going to pause right here. I want you to think for a second about the anticipation of this reunion. You guys have had family reunions, but it's been like maybe it was a couple months, maybe it was a year. But this is a dad. He hasn't seen his son in 20 years. And so you the welling up of emotion, like, I want to see my dad again. And that boy it's funny, he's a ruler of all the nation, but he kind of turns back into that 17-year-old kid. He's going to go get a hug from his dad. And so here's what happens. He's a long way off. He kind of comes running up to his dad, and this is beautiful. He presented himself to him. It's like, Dad, look, are you proud of me? Remember, we're all kids at heart. We all want Dad to be proud of us. And he fell on his neck, which is a euphemism for he just gave him a big hug and wept on his neck a good while. It was just like a moment of like, you ever hug somebody you couldn't even talk? You're just like choked up with tears, and it's like, oh man, I can't believe we're together again. And Israel said to Joseph, now, let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive. He's like, it's so good. You kill me now. It doesn't get much better than this. Everything from here on is downhill, because this is the moment, right? This is the moment of all moments. This is the Super Bowl of my life. I get to see my son again. And when the funny thing happens, he doesn't die soon. Like, he's an old man, but he gets even older. He lives for 17 more years after this. And so he kind of gets back. He lost 20 years with his son, but he gets another 17. And then eventually he does die. And they take this big funeral procession that goes all the way back to Canaan, where where Jacob was from. They bury him next to his father Isaac, next to his father Abraham. And then they come back. And this is the part of the story where, we turn Jerry Springer on everybody. This is why you read the Bible, because it's real life, reality TV, awesome. Pick your show, this is it. Like, you can just kind of imagine, like, hey, we're going to do a reality TV show on the fate of Joseph's brothers. And so the camera's on them. And when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father, who I know you were close to him, but he had a special message that he for some reason didn't tell you, and he told us. Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. Remember, he's the God of your father. Remember your dad, Jacob, you loved him. So forgive the servants of him. And so Joseph hears this, And it's like, I mean, every time you turn around, Joseph's crying. You're like, I thought you were like ruler of all Egypt, thought you were kind of in charge of stuff, but why are you bawling your eyes out all the time? And this is kind of awkward, right? We're like, I mean, you need some therapy. I mean, didn't have therapy. It was just, emotions kind of just blew up, and he just bawls his eyes out. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. And his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. And why is Joseph crying? This is where I just kind of, why is he bawling his eyes out right here? I mean, one, the emotion of his father's death, got it. I mean, it was 20 years ago when they saw him begging for his life. Don't do it! Don't throw me down this pit. Don't sell me into slavery. Come on. Judah, come on. Reuben, come on. And maybe that's what's going through his mind. But remember, he's forgiven them. But these guys haven't grasped it yet. See, these brothers, they lived in fear because they feared Joseph's forgiveness was too good to be true. And why wouldn't they? I mean, they live in an achievement-based society. I mean, shoot, we live in a trophy-based society. I mean, everybody gets a trophy, right? Whether you deserve it or not. But back then, it was like this, like, you better earn everything you get. You better perform. In fact, this is what's almost crazy about this. I want you to see what happened before Jacob died. He brought all of the sons in, and he's going to give a blessing on their life. And it wasn't really a blessing for everybody, because Jacob knew about what most of his sons were. He knew about they weren't exactly good people. In fact, he sits down Reuben, lays his hand on Reuben's head, and this is what he says to him. Reuben, you are my firstborn. Right? And the firstborn is always supposed to get like double the inheritance of everybody else. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the first fruits of my strength. He's laying his hands on him, and he's receiving it. It's like, yeah, I am. Preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. And then this blessing just takes a weird turn. Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence. Because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. And then he gets personal. He went up to my couch. All right, what he's saying here is, let me G-rate this thing as best as possible. So Jacob had 4 wives, and Leah was the mother of Reuben, and Rachel had a sister, Bilhah, or had a servant, Bilhah, who became Jacob's wife as well. Different time. And Reuben decides to have intimate relationship in his father's bed with one of his wives. And Jacob never forgets it. In fact, when he's about to die, he's put a blessing on his son. He's like, he remembers to say, like, you're no longer getting my inheritance. You're no longer first and preeminent. You are no longer the chosen one, so to speak. You're no longer, you forfeited your rights as firstborn. Wow. And then the next guys that Jacob blessed, or last words to, I mean, this is last words. Last thing you hear from your dad, you're a failure. Thank you very much. Right? And then his brothers, Levi and Simeon, he recalled the time that they murdered an entire town. He's like, and you guys are violent and angry. You're not going to get anything with me, right? Like, and next. And then he brings up Judah. Now, Judah wasn't a saint. But here's what he says to Judah. This you're going to be like, wow, this is pretty good for Judah. Judah, the fourthborn, is going to become like the firstborn. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down. He crouched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. He gets to collect taxes from his brothers. Wow. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples, binding his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He has washed his garments in wine, his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. Judah is kind of blessed for the achievements that his father saw. Does that make sense? Judah, like when his brother was about to be, in the eyes of Jacob, Benjamin was going to be kept in Egypt forever because he didn't know the whole story, and neither did Judah. But Judah goes, I will bear the blame forever. I will step up and lead this family, and I will take on the blame if I don't bring your son back to you. And that's all that Jacob saw. Like, look at this guy. He's measuring up. That's a man. He takes responsibility. He didn't know that 20 years ago, it was Judah who had the great idea to sell Joseph into slavery in the first place. Awkward, right? He didn't know that Judah, when he was supposed to have, whenever his sons were married off, and kind of the tradition of the time, is that if your son died, then the next son would take his place and bear children through his wife for him. Well, his first son dies, and then he gives the second son. That son dies. He gives the next son to that wife. It's like the black widow syndrome. And he's like, I don't really know if I'm going to give my next son to that woman. And he doesn't. And then Tamar, this is where I'll try and G-rate this again. You got to read the Bible. Like, if you're like into good books, great stories, read this thing. It's kind of about as X-rated as it gets. Anyway, so like there's a little perfect 10 there of the time. And so Judah goes and visits perfect 10. And Tamar dressed up as a perfect 10 worker, or dressed down to a perfect 10 worker. Anyway, and then all of a sudden they connect, right? And so she's posing as a prostitute, and he has a relationship with her, and then they have a baby, which was what his son was supposed to. Think about how awkward this is. And Jacob doesn't know about that. And this is why these guys, their whole life, they're kind of terrified, right? If they really knew what was going on in my life, if they really knew. Like you've said this. Listen. I see all you guys' pretty faces right here on Sunday, and it's like everyone's a little happy family and looks perfect, and everything looks great, and I'm like, hey, we're all giving each other hugs, and, it's like, oh, it's such a great Sunday. And the reality is your marriage is a disaster, right? Like, you don't want anyone to know about that. Like, your relationship's your purity factor is in, like, the toilet, right? The way the work is going, you're just like, I'm just praying somebody gives me a job. Like, nobody sees that part. And there's shame that we walk around with, and it's like emblazoned on our soul, but we can't tell anybody. And that's how these guys felt. These guys would like just walk around with shame everywhere because of all their actions, because they knew the real deal, and they knew that Joseph knew the real deal. And so they're terrified that it's all going to come out, and they are dead men because of what they did to Joseph. And they would say, we deserve it. But here's the thing about Jesus. And this is why Joseph is what he's saying here is so powerful. He is going to be kind of a forerunner to Jesus, and I'm going to show you how. Watch this. Watch this next verse. This is the part that you just kind of can feel the moment of like the powerful statement. This is kind of one of those life verses. Get out your coffee cup and just kind of etch it on there. So in response to these guys, don't just, your dad told us to tell you, forgive us. But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? Vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I will repay. That's what God says. Joseph, that's not me. And then he says this quote, this is verse 20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive. Many people be saved as they are today. This is huge. You see, because here's what he's saying. Watch. Like the thing that was great about you deserve to die. You're absolutely right. But I forgave you. And I'm not like most people. I'm not going to forgive like the world forgives. Because I simply do what anybody would do that was confident that God is with him. And I'm going to forgive you like only God can forgive. See, this is huge. Because we have this kind of, in our minds, we kind of feel like we deserve good stuff because we're good people. Am I right? We kind of, whatever we kind of think, however other people view us, that's how we sort of view us. We kind of just take, if I present a happy, I'm a perfect person, then we expect people to view us that way, and that's how we start to view ourselves, and it's like everyone's happy. And that's where we get our self-esteem issues from. Anyway, it's another story, another sermon. And what happens is that we ultimately find out that something's broken. Here's a good way to put this. So when Adrian and I when Adrian and I had our son, Austin, it was, all the family comes and everyone's, saying really sweet things. And one of the relatives came over and picked up Austin. Oh, he's so perfect. He's a perfect little boy. Adrian, you deserve this. I know, you're like, oh, that's so sweet. And after that, Adrian and I went back, and we just started talking about it. It was one of those weird conversations. And the reality was like, no, we don't deserve this. You know what we deserve? And you're going to be like, Chris, that's a little extreme. We deserve hell. I'm like, whoa, hey, Chris, we were talking about babies. No, but because if you knew what happened in my own soul, if you knew the darkness that I kind of am, you'd be like, you don't deserve him. You deserve pain, torture, and punishment. And I do. Because in my heart of hearts, I'm a broken person. And so every good thing that we get is a gift from God, and we got to take it as such. Because I deserve death in the grave. But here's what Jesus did. He came from heaven to earth and died on the cross for my sins, and he rose from the dead. And in the same way, watch this. Watch this. God meant it for good to bring it about that many people should be kept alive. And one of those people that should be kept alive was Judah and all of Judah's kids, even his warped family. Because through Judah and Tamar, their relationship from Perfect 10, what came from that is Jesus. Isn't that crazy? So even in this moment, Joseph didn't do this. He didn't allow the evil of the moment to consume him, because you've had this happen. You have had this happen. You've had bad stuff has happened to you, hasn't it? And you've been like, why is this happening to me? This is a complete mess. Because here's the thing that Joseph did. Joseph understood that God allows even evil to fulfill his purpose. Oh, what? So when you think about the cruddy stuff, the mess that your life is, it goes from a mess to a message, doesn't it? When you're able to overcome the darkness, when you're able to overcome the stuff that just keeps piling on, that career that was supposed to go a certain way, and it kind of it's hijacked because some jerk comes along and doesn't, gets in the way and becomes a barrier. You're like, what gives? What happened? Why me? Or that relationship, that marriage, that family, that everything that was going right, and then somebody came in and hijacked it. What happened? I know. We could all point to our story. We've all been a victim at some point. But at some point, we've all been a person who made another person a victim, if we're just honest. But here's what Jesus does. And here's why this is so important, what Joseph understood. He can allow you to take that victim so that you might be a victor. He can take that mess and give it a message. He can take the test that you're going through and make it a testimony so that the whole world will know that it's not about you. And it's about a greater purpose that God is doing because he's working something. Listen, don't let God waste a pain. Listen, I get it. When I was like the little kid growing up, the runt of the litter, so to speak. So everywhere I was the smallest kid ever. Even when I was living in Japan, for crying out loud, I was a small kid. And it'd be, there I was in 6th grade, and the older kids were holding me over banners, was really, it's fun. I'm like, why'd I go through that? Or why when I got back, I sat the bench for varsity basketball, and that was the most important thing in the whole world. Or when I went to West Point, I was the dumb kid in the school. I was like, ugh. And then when I graduated from there, I went to Ranger School, and everything was miserable. I graduated from that. I went to combat. Let me tell you, not exactly happy, fun times all the time. Why? If I were to look at that as just, here's my poor, miserable life, woe is me, and I become the ultimate victim. Or I can use that to become a victor. How about the miscarriage? Oh, that was painful. How about my dad dying? Oh, man. Listen, we have an opportunity. We can take everything that's happened to us and we can just isolate even further and kind of implode in ourselves, or we can take the pains and the hurt and the heartache and we can let God shine through us. Because you know what? God doesn't waste a hurt. He doesn't waste a hurt. You've been there, all balled up in the fetal because you got broken up with, or the job went down. You're just gonna have a moment where you're gonna collapse, right? And in those moments, through tears, I'm like, God, don't waste this hurt. Don't waste this hurt. To help me to trust you, that you are going to allow this evil, this pain, this hurt to fulfill your purpose. I don't know how. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm kind of clueless to the whole thing, but please, 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 help me. And that's why I can pastor right now. Because I've taken all the messes, all the tests, and made them a message and a testimony. And my heartbeat is that you would too. And maybe you're not going to be a pastor of a church, but you're a pastor of the office, pastor of your family, pastor of your community. And people are going to need you. And when their life's a complete disaster, you're going to say, let me tell you what I went through and how that test became a testimony or that mess became a message. It sounds so cliche, but only because it's true. You see, that's powerful. That's Joseph's story. And again, going back to that, just that thought of, we look at our story as, I deserve this, or like, and not in this framework of grace. We still have this moralistic, theistic belief, like, God is up there and he's just keeping score, and I deserve pain, and I deserve punishment, or I deserve good things because I've been a really good person. And I want you to get beyond that. I want you to get beyond that. It will lessen the blow of the pain. It'll give reality to your great achievements. When you see it all as a gift and all part of his plan of his infinite wisdom, because God has a plan, just like he did with Joseph, to bring about the saving of many lives through the line of Judah, which would come Jesus. And here we are, saved today because of that. I mean, it's crazy to think how all the, I don't want to get into, butterfly effect, but I mean, reality, that's what we're looking at. Like one moment, your pain, you'd use it for God's glory. And the next thing you know, it's being used over and over and over, and the story's being told, and God gets glorified. Every one of you has that story. Every one of you's been through the mess. Every one of you has got a mess that they could declare, well, here's the message God gave me. Every one of you does. And so I don't want you to have a hurt wasted. I don't want, those hard times in your marriage, that first year of marriage where it was like complete disaster and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't think we're going to make it. Or maybe it was year 7, or maybe it was year 27. I don't know. But what if you were to use that as the story that people go like, there's hope for me too? You're not alone. Don't think for a second, I'm the only one who feels this way, because just like you, there are people hurting just like you that are hoping that somebody has a story, has a message for their mess. In fact, that's why Joseph can say this. He kind of composes himself. The tears are he's like, don't fear. Don't fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. And thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. That's what Joseph did. Joseph simply did what anybody would do that was confident that God was with him. That's all he did. Joseph simply did what anybody would do when thrust through the worst set of circumstances, thrust through the best set of circumstances, thrust through a set of revenge, and ultimately coming back to that question, why me? And he goes, who is God trying to help and save through the mess of my own life? Man, I want you to think about this. What mess? What mess are you holding on to? Let's think about this. There's a couple different messes we can talk about. You kind of fall on both ends of the spectrum on this usually. The one end of the spectrum is you've been hurt, you've been the victim. And your story's hard, and your story's hurtful. And are you going to be a victim, or are you going to turn to be a victor? And on the other side of that, there are those of you who've hurt some people. And you're like, I deserve pain, I deserve punishment, I deserve every bad thing that comes to me, I deserve it. Man, hurricane needs to go through my house because I'm a sinner, right? I mean, no. See, all of God's wrath was poured out on Jesus. And so anytime you hear some person on TV saying hurricanes and tornadoes were God's wrath on that city, that's crazy talk. That's not true. All of God's wrath was poured out on Jesus. And if you can receive it, that Jesus died on the cross for your sins, his wrath will be poured out on Jesus for you as well. And that's the hard part we don't get. Because we keep going. We don't have confidence that God is with us. And so my heart this morning is that you would look at the forgiveness issues that you have, or maybe the hurt and the heartache that you have, and you would simply turn from the darkness of your own sin and trust that you really, really, really can be forgiven. You can. I promise you can. So here's a question. What mess? What mess? I want you to think about this for a second. You guys have your little bulletin thing. Can you guys hold that thing up? Can someone hand me one real quick? Someone bring me a bulletin thingy. Yeah, right there. I want you to do something. I know this might be weird, but we do weird stuff here all the time, so kind of normal. and we are in Austin. So I want you to write down, if you got a pen or just, draw some blood, something, whatever you need. I want you to write down what mess it is that God is going to turn into a message because you are confident that God's with you. I mean, no, think about this. Don't let this go off lightly. In fact, through the first, I don't know, do we sing stanzas? That's really Grayson's department, but the first part of the song, I don't want you to stand up. I want you to sit there. I want you to reflect on your mess. I want you to think about what's the mess? What's the mess? I want you to write it out. And then if you feel bold enough, you can write your name on it or don't write your name on it and put it into the giving box right there. There's Trevor. Trevor, wave at everybody. That's where the giving box is. And just put it on. We'll pray for you about whatever mess it is. And we'll want to turn it into a message. I mean, think about your life. You've got a story. Someone's probably said, you should write a book about your life. It's crazy. And you're like, I probably should. Well, at least tell somebody about it and about how God is going to redeem all the pain and the hurt and the heartache and all this stuff. That's what he does. He's kind of good at that miracle stuff. I want you to write that down. And listen, if you're here today and if you've never received forgiveness, if you're still kind of wandering through life, and you're like, I don't know. And you're feeling doubtful about the state of your soul, maybe today is the day. Maybe today is the day that you're going to be like, Jesus, would you forgive me? Would you please forgive me? And every time you pray that, he says, yes, of course I will. Why? Because in Joseph, he preserved Judah, who preserved his whole family, who brought Jesus. And Jesus came from heaven to earth, and he died on the cross for the sins of you and me and the whole rest of the world, for the darkness and pain and suffering that's been in our lives, so that one day we could be with him. And there would be no more pain, no more suffering. There would be this immense joy. And all the stuff that you thought was just so painful, it's better than you could ever imagine. I'm not trying to paint a picture of heaven so that you'll be thinking about clouds and harps all day. I'm thinking about taking heaven and making it right here. And restoring that marriage that's sort of just messed up and broken. But ultimately, we are going to a place that's better than you could ever experience here. Better than your best day of the honeymoon, better than the best day of Disneyland. This is going to be a place where it's going to be peaceful, finally. And all that stress and the strain of life that you've been feeling is going to be gone. You're going to feel fulfilled like it was your favorite day of work. That's going to be a good day. But right now is your turn and your time to take the mess and turn it into the message. Would you guys pray with me? Father, today there are people here that are hurting. There are people here that are going through a mess and they're feeling tested. And God, I'm praying that you would take their mess and turn it into a message. Lord, that you would take their tests and turn it into a testimony. Lord, that you would take their trials and you turn it into a triumph, and they would move from being victims to victors. God, please do that. Please, please, please. And God, we're praying. We're saying, please, God, please. Use the pain that causes us to weep. Use that pain that causes us to go into that fetal ball and go, I can't take any more. Don't waste a hurt. Please, God. And Lord, if there's somebody here who doesn't know you, would you fill up their heart and their soul with this message that at one time was a mess, that Jesus was crucified by evil men, and he died on that cross for the sins of people who deserved death and punishment, but you are going to give them life. Lord, would they come to believe that you are the only way to salvation, that you died on that cross, you rose from the dead, victorious over death and the grave, and we celebrate it, Father, because you have put in a new heart and a new soul in us, and we can live and be joyful. God, please keep doing that thing that you're doing. And Lord, for those of us who kind of have been called according to your name, Lord, would you continue to walk with us through the mess and turn it to this message that we would declare to everyone the amazing and mighty works of your name and your fame. Please, Jesus. God, we're praying that you could do more than we ever hope for or ask through the mess of our lives by the power of your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.